being recorded.
Great. So it is being recorded, but you are all completely anonymous in the process. So you're protected by the Market Research Society guidelines, and you will see on the participant list there are some people listening in. They are some of Schoolzone's clients who have a particular interest in primary assessment and are just really keen to hear what you have to say. But please don't be put off by the fact that people are listening in, because they, as I say, they really are just interested. They want to know what's happening down on the front line. They want to know your experiences, and yes, it's just your open and honest feedback, which we are after. Okay. So before we crack on with any introductions, does anybody have any questions for me? No? Good. Well, if anything comes to mind, just put it in the chat pod there and Joe will respond. And another thing I forgot to mention, but it is quite nice. I can see Therese actually just joined us. There we go. If you do want to alert me to the fact that you want to say something in the discussion, I know it can be quite difficult because it's a big group and we're all talking over the phone, so we don't want to talk over each other. But a nice tool is the raise hand tool, and at the top of the screen you can see an icon with a man raising his hand, and if you click that, it basically just alerts me to the fact that Joe's playing with it now. You can see it just alerts me to the fact that you want to say something. In some focus groups, everyone uses it, and in others nobody uses it. So if you do want to alert me to the fact you want to say something, feel free to use that icon if you want to. Okay, lovely. Well, I think enough of me talking. Be good to hear from you. So we'll do some introductions just by going down the participant list, and when you introduce yourself, please could you just tell us obviously your name, a little bit about your school, so what type of school you work in, size, catchment, Ofsted rating, and I think that's pretty much it for tonight's introductions. We won't go into too much detail because we'll pick up a bit more of the detail when we get into the discussion itself. So just basically your name and a little bit of background to the school you work in, and your job role as well. Let's start off with you, Andy, because you're at the top of the list. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, sure. I'm Andy Courts. I'm the head teacher of a primary school just outside of Peterborough. 2-form entry primary, predominantly white British, fairly low preschool meals. Catchment is fairly affluent. We are good school, having got the school's first goods judgment in 36 years last November.
Brilliant. Right. So that's, quite a turning point then, sort of reaching good for you there, Andy, and I'm sure you were good before, but has it changed things since you've got that good rating from Ofsted?
There's a lot more belief around the place, and we're now far oversubscribed. Probably the most oversubscribed school in the area.
Yeah, interesting. Lovely. Well, thank you for that introduction, Andy. And actually, before I move on to Claire, can I just check, was that Teresa? Did you join onto the line at some point?
I did. I'm very sorry I was late. I was delayed at school and in the meeting, and then I had to pick my son up from the childminder.
No worries. I know these things happen when you work in education. It's really easy to get sidelined. Don't worry, you've not really missed anything. I've just sort of told everybody about the background of the focus group. Obviously, we're talking about primary assessment, but I know that you've done one of these focus groups before, so I'm sure we basically just started introductions, so we'll come to you in a moment. But let's hear from Claire next. Claire, please could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Claire Taylor. I'm a Year 6 teacher in a 1-form entry school in Derbyshire. We're in quite a rural area, and we were deemed good 3 years ago. Our results have been outstanding, so we were hoping for an outstanding until this year's assessment, when unfortunately our reading and our SPAG has let us down.
That's interesting that you say that, Claire, and I think I picked up on that in your pre-session task as well. You're not the only one. Reading and SPAG seems to have been a real area of difficulty in those SATS tests, and we will be coming on to it in the discussion, you know, how you're going to be addressing that. So it will be really interesting to get that feedback. Thank you, Claire. Good, lovely. Let's, obviously we've got Dirk and Elizabeth are listening in, so let's move on now to Hilary, please, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Hilary. I'm head teacher of a primary school in Luton. Originally a one-form entry, now on 2 sites, 20 minutes walk away from each other, 3-form, and we're up to year 3. So 450 pupils, and we'll be 630 eventually. Huge waiting list. I think we've got 47 waiting to get into reception, and that's not unusual in Luton. Lots of children flying in daily and wanting a school place. I'm an NLE, so my school's National Support School. Our last Ofsted was outstanding.
Right, okay, lovely. Well, thank you, Hilary. Interesting that you are, was it a teaching school that you said you were? Sorry.
No, I'm a National Leader of Education, so
right,
my
okay.
school's a National Support School, so we support other schools too.
Right. Okay, interesting. Great, lovely. Thank you, Hilary. And it would be really good to get that perspective as a support school as well this evening, and kind of what you're doing. Well, firstly,
I'm working with 4 schools at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. We'll get. I'm sure you'll tell us more about it later on kind of the particular areas that schools are needing support in. But thank you, Hilary. Let's move on now to Jamie.
Hello, my name is Jamie. I'm a head teacher, 2-form entry church school in Hertfordshire, currently with a good rating from Ofsted.
Lovely. Thank you, Jamie. Brilliant. Let's move on now to Naomi.
Hello, I'm maths lead at a large primary in Derbyshire. We're a good school. We've got quite pleasing SATS results from last July, and we have a relatively small number of special needs and pupil premium children.
Great, lovely. Thank you, Naomi, and great that we've got a maths leader in our group tonight as well, because you know, obviously there have been challenges in all areas of the curriculum, so the SPAG, the reading, but also from a maths perspective, it would be good to hear how your school's going to kind of focus and develop in maths as well, and maybe areas of maths that you want to focus on more in order to prepare for the next round of SATS tests as well. So great, thank you, Naomi. Moving on now to Sarah, if we could hear from you.
Sure, yes. Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm Key Stage 2 Numeracy Coordinator for a large primary, about 700 pupils, still under local authority, pretty much kind of a mixed catchment, really. We're kind of on a counsellor state, so all the associated issues that you'd expect with that, you know, in terms of free school meals, high percentage, and ethnic minorities, but also it's in catchments of quite an affluent village, so very mixed. We got RI category for our last Ofsted, but we've got a new head teacher this year who's kind of very enthusiastic and pushing through lots of changes, so fairly hopeful to move back into good, you know, when they come back again.
Right.
And in terms of our results, we actually went up slightly last year in our last lot, but it was kind of anticipated because they were quite a bright cohort, so, you know, even with the challenges of the reading and the SPAG, they still managed to improve on the previous year.
Good. Lovely. Thank you ever so much, Sarah. Fantastic. Finally then, let's hear from Teresa.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Teresa.
Oh,
hi.
Hello. And my internet connection's gone down. I don't know if you can, I can't see me on screen at the moment.
Oh, that's fine. We can hear you, so.
I'm Teresa. I'm a deputy head of a 1-form entry school in South Gloucestershire, which is quite near to Bristol. It's quite an urban area that I teach in, even though the authority itself is quite sort of leafy and countryside. We've got a quite high number of pupil premium, 25% and 20% on the SEN register. Our Key Stage 2 results were in line with national averages last year for the overall percentages in reading, writing and maths, but are combined with the low. because we didn't have sort of even profiles of children getting the expected level across the board. But our progress was quite good. We were quite pleased with it when compared with other figures nationally.
Great, lovely. Thank you, Teresa. And I'm really pleased that you mentioned that word progress, because I do want to touch on that actually for the early part of tonight's discussion. Before I do, just to kind of give you a sense of where I'm going with it. So in the pre-session task, and thank you to those of you who have submitted your answers. It's just really great for us to get a bit of a picture of you all and what's happening prior to the session. And some of you have emailed Helen back your answers. And one of the questions we asked was, what do you think the purpose of assessment is? I know it's quite a big question that we asked you there, but really interestingly, looking at your feedback, there were really two main themes that emerged, which were the purpose of assessment is A, to plan for teaching and learning and to obviously fill those gaps in pupil knowledge, but also to measure progress throughout children's school lives. And of course we use assessment to make sure that they are progressing in the way that we want them to be. So coming back to Teresa, and you mentioned that word progress there. I do just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about progress and really how you're, and this is a question out to the whole group, how you're measuring progress in your school. And I mean across the school as well, so all the way from reception through Key Stage 1, all the way up to Year 6 as well. I know some of you have emailed us or emailed Helen beforehand letting us know, but it would be great if, in fact Joe's just put the question in the chat pod there, how you're measuring progress across your school. I don't know if anybody would like to kick off over the phones by just really summarising what they're doing from early years all the way up to Year 6.
I'll start since I mentioned it, Teresa.
Hi, Teresa.
So obviously with between Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, with the Key Stage 2 SAT, we just looked at the government document and looked at the methodology in that and looked at progress to compare to what was sort of expected, and that's why I made that statement about why we were pleased with the progress that we made. In other year groups, it's been virtually impossible to measure progress from the end of beginning of Key Stage 1 to the end of Key Stage 1. In other year groups, our authority has devised something called the age-related expectations, where they've broken down the curriculum for every single year group from Year 1 to Year 6 and wrote a set of statements that obviously teachers plan from that. And the expectation is that children make a year's worth of progress, which essentially is whatever proportion of percentage of statements they get from one year group, it's at least reflected in the similar proportion from another year group. So, for example, I teach in Year 3 2 days a week. So if a child got 65% of the statements in Year 3, the expectation would be get at least 65% of the statements in Year 4. Your progress would be that perhaps 50% of that class made more than the expected progress. So it's quite a convoluted arrangement, and it makes moderation near on impossible, because even though it's been written with our authority, every school's got a different interpretation of what good progress looks like.
Absolutely. Interesting, really interesting hearing that, and just looking in the chat pod there. I mean, it certainly seems like you're sort of doing quite different things in terms of measuring progress across the school. I know Joe's just asked Claire. So Claire, I can see you use the Stats Sheffield tracking grids. Could you just briefly explain what they are and how you use them?
They've been published to ensure that the KPIs are still appropriate. So we use them to track whether the the pupils are on track, whether they're at the right place. They have really nice statement descriptors in them, which make life easy when you're trying to work out actually what is required of to meet a certain standard. And they can be used in different ways. You can use them purely for planning and assessment. You can also use their key concept grid, which allow you to measure sort of depth of learning through less objectives but in greater detail. We're just getting into using them electronically. We had a meeting 2 days ago, with South Sheffield, who came to sort of sell it to us. We've been using their paper grids until now, but it seems a very sort of holistic and very easy way to track progress, and you can do it by whole class objectives. You can look at groups, have that group got it, and it just seems quite a really simple way of tracking progress.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and what I was really interested about what you said there was that you said it's about the depth of learning, and that idea as well. You said about from what you said, it seems to pinpoint areas that you need to or your teachers need to focus their teaching on in order to really help fill the gaps. Really, is that fair to say? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just taking it back to, for example, a key stage year 2 maths objectives. Be able to do the 2s, 5s, and 10s times table. If you click on that objective, it brings up loads and loads of different ways that the child has to be secure in it before you can say absolutely working at great depth in that.
Yeah.
So it really can inform your planning and can give you ideas how to extend your most able children. And also you can track progress just through, just tiny steps as well.
Really interesting, and I will come back to it later in the discussion. In fact, I realise I'm going to jump around already, which is really bad of me in my discussion guide. But I just want to pick up on that idea of, it obviously seems really important that you're able to assess that depth of learning and look at those gaps in knowledge and understanding. Out to the rest of the group, really, is anybody else using a system or a tool or a product that also enables them to explore those gaps in understanding and therefore target their teaching accordingly? So in that sense, you're really using assessment in order to inform future planning. Anybody else using anything similar to what Claire's got with the Stat Sheffield?
I think our system, it's Teresa, I think our system does allow for that because it's very visual, so you can actually see what statements are missing. The trouble that we've got is that the key message that we've got with our grids is that if there's gaps in previous year groups, you don't teach from that curriculum because it's about mastery at the year group that you're teaching at the moment, is that you find a lot of sort of gaps. It appears that the children are sometimes better than they are because they've mastered one skill, particularly if skills aren't linear, and then there's sort of key gaps on the other year group. Sometimes it's not an issue, but sometimes it is.
Yeah, interesting. And anybody else, before I move on, anybody else got any interesting tools or resources that they use in order to get that kind of gap analysis, really, and use their assessment to inform future planning that they want to?
Yes, it's Sarah here. We use Pupil Asset as our main tool, and as well as kind of doing the termly assessments that I've mentioned on the chat pod, we're also encouraged to go on to Asset at the end of doing each unit for maths or literacy, and for each child we have to show whether they're kind of emerging or developing or secure in each skill, and then you can use that as a guide to see if you need to kind of revisit topics for certain children as well, or if they've kind of all got to grips with it, which is quite useful.
Great, thank you. Lovely, thank you for all that feedback. I do want to come back to that idea of gaps, sort of assessing gaps in children's understanding and their knowledge later on in the discussion, because just looking at the pre-session feedback we've got from you, it seems quite important that your assessment resources are able to inform future teaching and planning. So we will return to that idea. If you've got anything though in the meantime, Joe has put the question in the chat pod there, so just let us know and we'll pick it up hopefully within the next 45 minutes or so. I've also put a question on screen there, just asking, we'd just like to get a sense really of how regularly you collect summative performance data during the year, and obviously I know you probably do a blend of both formative and summative assessments. So if you don't collect summative performance data during the year, do let us know, apart from, of course, the SATS tests in year 6. But yeah, just give you a moment to complete that poll, and I'll have a look at what you voted. Okay. Andy, could I come to you quickly, because I noticed that you said you used Target Tracker as your assessment resource, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I used Target Tracker when I was teaching, and it's more of a am I right in thinking it's more of a formative assessment tool where you can basically highlight specific aspects of learning when children have accomplished them and kind of build up that bigger picture, but it doesn't really. Obviously, you can input levels onto it, but would it be fair to say it's more of a tracking and formative assessment resource than a summative assessment tool?
Yeah, I mean, we use it to enter our summative assessment results into.
Yeah.
It's tried to do a lot in terms of formative assessment, in terms of the gap analysis, etc.
Yeah.
But no, not for summative.
No.
We don't do anything for summative at the moment.
Well,
we haven't found a product out there that we thought was particularly accurate with all the changes that were going on.
That's interesting. And that's kind of why I asked you the question, because I noticed that you used Target Track and you hadn't said anything else. So I was wondering if you didn't do any
I was
summative.
taking a type, but
yeah.
So but you saved me the trouble.
Yeah, and on that point, are you currently looking for a summative assessment product or resource or tool that you can use, or do you not feel that it's necessary in your school? You're kind of happy building up that picture in a kind of formative assessment way?
No, I think I certainly speak for my colleagues here at school when we say we miss summative assessment, because it kind of validated our judgment. It probably gave us more of an idea of what the children might actually score in their FAT. Than perhaps just a teacher assessment. Just because they can do it in their books doesn't mean that they can necessarily do it when they're just asked it cold.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And that's not what assessment is really for, in my opinion. But that's what we're being asked to do.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, we'll come on later in the discussion. I think I've got a couple of polls actually on, which will be very relevant to you, what you look for in a summative assessment product. So it'd be really interesting to get your feedback there on kind of your perfect product or tool. So we'll return to that, and I can see that you've been busily typing away in the chat pod. But what I will do is actually return to some of those comments, because I can see that you are starting to describe the types of resources and products that you're using, which is great, and I want to return to that. But before I do, I think the next part of our discussion, we just want to briefly touch on the impact of how these reforms to assessment have impacted on teaching and learning, not only in maths and literacy, which I'm sure it will have done in some ways, but also thinking about the wider curriculum as well. So we'll spend about the next 10 minutes or so talking about that. And actually my colleague Fran is going to ask you a few questions on that. Fran is amazingly informed to ask these questions because she was teaching in year 6 up until July, so she's very, very fresh out of the classroom, and I know she's got a few questions. So bear with us just a moment whilst I mute and Fran unmutes, and then she'll ask you those questions. So a bit fiddly, but here we go. So let's mute Fran. There we go, and I will mute myself so we don't get a feedback loop. Lovely. Can everyone hear me all right?
No. A little faint.
Quite quiet.
I'm a bit faint, am I?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is that any better?
Slightly.
A bit.
A little bit better. Oh, am I better off?
There's quite a lot of feedback on your voice.
Shall I switch to your face? Is that easier? Is it any better?
No.
No.
About the same.
Yeah, bear with us 2 minutes and we'll just
Sure.
swap. Hang on, sorry. Okay, hi everybody, apologies for that. Hopefully that's better.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Okay, so yeah, we just wanted to spend a few minutes sort of talking about the impact of the SATs on your timetabling, really. So sort of at a daily and a weekly level, but also in terms of the wider curriculum as well. So are you finding that maths and English is sort of taking over, or are you still finding time to fit in the other subjects? And is that different across year groups? So is year 6 more squeezed than others, for example? So I don't know, Naomi, shall we start with you? Because we haven't heard from you for a while.
Yeah, maths and English is most definitely all the priority still, with other things being squeezed.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about how that's looking sort of timetable-wise for you?
Well, at the moment I'm not a year 6 teacher, so I'm not familiar with their timetable as such, but what we're going to be looking at the moment, it's not too bad. We're having a look at where the children are and what the needs are, and then we're looking at actually splitting some of those classes after Christmas, bringing in an extra teacher so we can have more quality input to smaller groups, and then hopefully that is going to make the afternoons a little bit less stressful than it has been previously.
And that's just for year 6, is it, that you're splitting the classes?
That will be just for them. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I see. Thank you for that. I think, was it Claire? Did you say you were a year 6 teacher at the minute?
Hi, Anya. It's having a significant impact in my school. We have grown a pot of cash into interventions, which take place all the time, to the point that try and find a room to do your intervention in is almost ridiculous. These happen all day long, but are happening more and more so in the afternoon. So a lot of children are being taken out to do sound discovery, for example, to improve their phonics and things like that, during PE, during art. And I do struggle with it, because those children, quite a lot of them, those are the subjects that they excel in.
Yeah,
and yet we're taking them out to plug the gaps in English and maths. But yeah, so it is having quite an impact.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody wants to type in the chat pod the subjects that they feel are being sidelined, if any, because of the kind of dominance of English and maths. It would be interesting to know which subjects are being squeezed. If that's the case, is it PE, as Claire's saying, or is anybody finding anything different?
The thing with the interventions is that there's some excellent ones now. I mean, I think there's some really, really good ones that have real impact.
Can you give us an example? Sorry.
The success arithmetic.
Yeah.
It has a typical sort of progress would be we've had a year's progress in 3 months, or 18 months progress in 3 months, but that is where the children are out for 4 sessions, 4 afternoons in the week, for about half an hour.
Yeah.
So whatever they miss, they miss.
Yeah.
But it does really help them. A lot of them enjoy that, because it's a very, very small group.
Yeah.
They really do enjoy it, and they like the success that they feel.
Yeah.
And because they're not missing their maths in the morning to do that, when they're in the morning, they're feeling better. They're feeling more successful, and it raises their self-esteem. So we don't have too many issues of the students not liking the interventions because of that knock-on effect.
Yeah, I see. I think because Jenny's going to cover resources a little bit later, so perhaps we could talk about any published booster products that you're using at that point as well, and whether anybody else has any schemes that they've used that have been particularly effective, or whether you create your own resources for your intervention needs. I know that I
I used to do a lot myself, but if you found things that are off the shelf that are working, then I'm sure everybody would be really interested to hear about those. So perhaps we can continue that later, because I really want to talk about as well whether you're having any new teaching approaches in response to the SAT. So I know Jamie and Sarah, you both said in your pre-session task that you're introducing the Singapore approach in your schools next year. I just wondered if you might want to tell us a little bit about that, what's prompted you to do it, and what you're hoping to achieve by it.
I'm happy to talk first.
Okay, for it, that's fine, yeah.
Well, currently our school at Heinemann is the main body of our resource, which is fine, but it just isn't cutting it in terms of the depth of understanding that the pupils are required to have. Introducing some of the elements of the Singapore method, or as we've explained it to parents, the concrete, pictorial and abstract approach to learning, I hope is going to accelerate children's understanding of the concepts that they're expected to understand now.
And are you expecting to use a published set of resources for that? Because obviously I know there's textbook series that you can buy to support that approach, and planning lots of staff CPD around it, or are you going more your own route?
We have planned quite a bit of CPD. I've had 3 hours of inset sessions on it this term. I haven't considered, well, I've left it to my maths coordinator. She's provided lots of resources. We haven't gone down the route of buying any particular published scheme. If somebody wants to point me in the direction of resources that they think they've used that they would recommend, then I'm happy to hear it.
Okay. Anybody got any thoughts on that for Jamie?
No, I'd be interested too, actually.
You do, sorry?
No, we don't. I'd be interested too, actually, if anybody knows any. It all sounds really great idea in theory. It does, make a lot of sense, this Singapore maths. And in our school, it's actually our new assistant head who's brought it all from her old school and is really enthusiastic about it. And she has given us some CPD. But I think one of the problems that we just most of us teachers haven't really kind of got enough resources, and we're all kind of just sort of sharing a few resources, and it's not really adequate at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're kind of finding our feet with it and sort of trying to teach the children, but not completely confident with it yet.
We use that. It's Teresa. We use elements of it. We don't use the whole. We don't use a published scheme. We've sort of dipped into books, and I'm afraid I can't remember the name of one of the scheme that we've brought in just elements of recently, because we've literally, it's so new. We're fortunate because we've just appointed an SLE, a specialist leader in education, who works at a maths hub from another school in September, and we'd also had support from an outstanding school. We're a good school, and we had support from an outstanding school who had taken on the Singapore approach. And it has been. I don't think it's been necessarily a response to the SATs. It's been a response to the whole mastery curriculum. Our maths set results were all right in the summer. We were relatively pleased with them, but hopefully we'll see more impact of that over time, because obviously the year 6 that just left in the summer, obviously I only had 2 years of the new national curriculum. So so it is really interesting. We use our TAs very, very differently, which I suppose a lot of schools do now, because they are used as a response to AFL and in response to AFL. And I suppose our whole terminology about differentiation is a lot different. Use some of the terms like rapid graphers and things like that now. And they're very much the mindset that children, they're not in, they've just not mastered the curriculum yet. So there's quite a lot of stuff going on about growth mindset.
Yeah, there's a lot of Carol's work going on, isn't there?
So we use things like hinge questions, where we teach a concept, and we obviously use the concrete, abstract and pictorial methods. And we're quite lucky, because we used to be a 1 formentary school, and we've gone down, 2 formentary school, and we've gone down to 1 formentary. So just historically, we've had just lots of equipment, which obviously we've had to replenish. Because over time and to become a bit more modern, but we've got quite a lot of maths resources, we do our teaching and use a hinge question to basically differentiate our groups, and we have TA support in the morning maths, We work quite closely in a cluster of schools, and I know one school that I was actually meeting with this afternoon. They've not got as much TA support as us, but they've reorganised their timetables, so the TA support is with the children in the maths lesson.
Yeah.
And anecdotally, sorry, just an aside, not on maths, because of the demands of English and maths on the timetable as a result of the new curriculum, our head teacher is thinking of taking the TA support out the mornings, aside from maths, and putting it in the afternoons, so the TA time, because she can't afford any more TA time, but the TA time that she has got is focused on running the intervention, so they're not, the children aren't taken out of quality first teaching, and it's just a habit in the afternoons.
Oh, okay, so it's having a staffing impact on you as well.
But the trouble is that you've got that situation where it's described before, that the children will be missing things like PE, music, art, and all the kind of things they enjoy.
It's really difficult, isn't it? You're kind of looking at the least worst scenario almost. But just as a quick side point, if Jamie and Sarah, I used Singapore Maths last year in the school that I taught in, so if you want to drop me an email afterwards, I'll happily point you in the direction of stuff that I've used in the past. Just a little sideline there. But Naomi, I can see okay, I can see you've got your hand up. Would you like to say anything, something about it?
Yeah, the conversation's perhaps moved on a little bit. I just wanted to chip in about Singapore Maths, really, because it's something I've been looking at quite a lot. And I think somebody put that they were disappointed, Hilary, I think.
Yeah, some of the schools I'm working with have been disappointed by their first assessments this year. They sort of went for it big time, and the results aren't what they expected. So personally, I use just elements in our maths teaching. We haven't gone for that method of teaching, but I was surprised actually at the results coming back like that.
I think that's what you've just said. To use elements of it is the key, really, because there's I think that Maths No Problem is perhaps the market leader at the moment.
Yeah, it's Maths No Problem that we use.
If you attend the training for that, which I was fortunate enough to be able to do, although we don't use it, loads of the principles within that can be implemented into your ordinary class teaching, and so you can take elements of the Eastern Asian approach without going wholeheartedly in something which is tremendously new and can feel quite threatening and not necessarily going to gel with a European approach, because we have a completely different ethos behind our learning in any case. Things that work really nicely and to encourage is the questioning and the discussion and the drawing, and children are going away and discovering and using. The BARD method in its essence is quite simple to pick up and encourage and works for lots of children. And these elements that you can bring in can have quite a significant impact with helping children to understand quite the concepts which traditionally are a little bit tricky, such as fractions. And the other thing I wanted to say, that I think the whole idea of not differentiating as such and not grouping your children, keeping the class together, mixing them all up, really does work if you work hard at it. And to stop a gap starting in the first place by focusing initially with this new approach down in the school and putting a lot of your efforts there to stop a big gap opening up in year one, which it always seems to, and to work your way up with it. I don't think you can dive in at the top and suddenly expect everybody to embrace it and to have a big impact. It won't.
Yeah, it is a big ethos change and a big change to your lesson structure. But I'm going to move on now and pass you back to Jenny, so she's going to talk to you a little bit more about resources. So if you bear with us for a second while we swap phones again. Hang on.
Hello everybody, Jenny again.
Hi.
I was listening actually to all of your feedback there, and I'm really glad that we got on to talking briefly about the mastery stuff, because it certainly sort of stood out to me in a couple of the pre-tasks that we got back that you were hoping to implement that approach. So great stuff. I just wanted to also touch a little bit upon reading, because I know reading has been highlighted by many of you, but also more widely in the research that we've been doing here at School Zone, an area that really was challenging for the new SAT test. and have we just got a bit of a crackle on the line?
Sorry, that's my fault.
That's fine. That's fine. No, that's fine. I just didn't. I thought, oh gosh, something's going wrong. It's fine. We're okay. So coming back to reading, I know many of you have highlighted that reading was particularly tough. And it sort of links to our next section of the discussion on resources, as to what is anybody doing anything to address that difficult area of the SATS tests. I know, Claire, you said that was a particular focus in your school, and am I right in thinking that you've actually already purchased Read Write Inc. in order to overcome that challenge?
We purchased Read Write Inc. for spelling, because spelling everything was better down in the bag. What we've done in reading is we've had a massive push on children reading at home again. So we've gone back to, it tended to sort of die out by about year 3, 4 when children became free readers, and the reading records sort of dwindled away and what have you. So we've had a big push again that parents take responsibility to listen to their children, to question them, and each class has chosen a range of genres that they want the children to have covered each term, which is shared with the parents. We've put in a couple of intervention groups, especially in year 6 for reading, in addition. And what else have we done? And although I'm really upset, because I do really feel that reading should be for pleasure, our guided reading sessions are being so much more sort of test orientated, with the questioning and what have you, just to get the children used to the sort of vocabulary and language that is required of them to pass this test. I hate saying that, but
it's difficult, isn't it? You're not the first teacher that I've heard saying that. So it's a difficult time for reading, but pleasing to see that Jamie, you did really well in your reading. So perhaps you could tell us the secrets behind your success. In fact, I noticed you've just said in the chat pod there. Perhaps you could tell us over the phone as well. How have you managed to do that?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a secret of success. I wish if it could be bottled, then I'd be selling it. Before I even arrived at the school, reading was very much a part of the culture of the school. So lots of activities that encourage development of reading, very much high profile for parents as well. We have a huge army of reading mums that come in and help children. You can always pretty much find some group of children reading along somewhere. That coupled with cross-curricular approaches to developing reading, guided reading activities, lots of comprehension stuff goes on as well. I am blessed that I am in a particular area where I have very, very supportive parents, so I think put it all together and you've got a recipe for success.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds very good. Lovely. And Hilary, mentioning you use Rising Stars. Is that to support reading? Sorry, I'm seeing part of what you said in the chat pod and it might be out of context.
I can't listen and type, you know.
It's hard, isn't it? It's really hard.
We use Read Write Inc. as well, and what we do, obviously, because they're supposed to be off the programme, technically at the end of year 1, but obviously we use it with lots of children because we've got so many EAL children and lots of children coming in from abroad who have no English language at all. So the children are quite used to using it quite high up in Key Stage 2. And we sort of do a run with it, especially for the spelling in SATs, and it's really, really successful in year 6. I've seen children who've struggled to spell at the beginning of year 6, and I've watched them sounding out and spelling writing their spellings correctly, and you just feel so proud. It sort of brings tears to your eyes that they actually have done it, in the space of time. So we use that. Yes, we're a Rising Stars partner school.
Okay.
So we use a lot of Rising Stars resources, and in fact, a lot of the information we get about what's happening in tests, etc., seems to come from publishers who have far more information than we do. As head teachers, I just always think, apart from like today's thing that's come out, and we've had an NHT email through saying what's happened today, but we get so little information as head teachers about actually what's going on. And people, publishers and people, go to all these meetings and seem to get all the information. So it's a shame there can't be a sort of a bit of a bridge there, so that when important information comes out and development of resources, etc., that heads can't be involved in it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I think that would be really, really useful.
Yeah.
So yeah, we use the assessment tests, the half-termly tests, the progress tests, and we track on Hearts for Learning, which is, I suppose, it's summative, but very like it, I think it was Andy said earlier with the target tracker, that it's you put it in afterwards, but it's actually a sort of formative summative. But my assessment manager absolutely loves it and is really enjoying using it. So she's the one that has to do all that sort of stuff. So I'm quite happy that she's happy, and the teachers input on it, and it's fine. But we do overlap with SIMS quite a bit as well. Our foundation subjects, we actually use SIMS to track.
Right. Okay. Great, lovely.
Get back to my typing.
Thank you, Hilary. I fully understand that it's really difficult to type and talk. That's why we have two moderators, because I can't possibly talk to you all on the phone and type away. And also just responding to your point, Hilary, in that I used to be a teacher myself as well in primary school, and I completely relate to what you're saying, that there's this kind of discord between what you're aware of and what you're being told about and know about in schools when you've got your head down and you're just getting through the day, and then what publishers and policymakers know and are aware of as well. It's very interesting. But that's just a sideline anyway. Okay, so let's just have a look at what you're typing away in the chat pod. I did just want to ask one more point about reading, because I know we've got a little bit of a conversation going about sort of online resources, and a question was put in the chat about the use of e-books. I did notice in the pre-task, although forgive me, I can't remember who it was, somebody said they use Accelerated Reader. Was it Naomi? Did you say you used Accelerated Reader?
I was talked about that on a previous conversation. Yes, we do use it. Yes, love it.
You find it useful, and do you use? Does it come with the accompanying STAR assessment?
Yes, it does.
So do you use both, or do you just use the Accelerated Reader?
Use them both. I've always used them. I've used Accelerated Reader for about 6 years now.
Interesting.
At the school I'm at now and the previous school, I'd be absolutely lost without it. It's so helpful, and I just think it's great.
Can you pinpoint any particular features about it which you find so appealing and which obviously make your life a lot easier and which you really like?
I trust it. I've found it to be accurate in its judgment of children's abilities and progress. It gives me all the data that I need, and I use it in addition to the sort of standard written reading tests that we do, and they normally completely correlate in terms of the children's ability. There's lots of rewards that we do, and the children buy into it. They get excited. They love it when they reach their target. Their parents can log on and see how they're doing, see what they've read. They can get emails when they've done a quiz and see how they've done. So they can get home and their mums already know that they've done really well that day. They get excited about the books because they're a wide variety and a wide genre, and they're keen to have new books to quiz. They just buy into the whole package. So for me, it sort of does the job of motivation for me, and I have everything connected with it, all sorts of assessment and analysis that I could want. And it also backs me up if a parent's having a moan about a particular level of book or something. I can say, well, this is right, because I can just print off something to support that, talk them through it, and everybody's usually happy. And the children make good progress. That's the important thing. It really does have what it says on the tin, an accelerated effect.
Yeah, really interesting, and it's interesting there, Naomi. Obviously, lots of benefits that you get from using that product, but you said it backs you up as well, and I think that's perhaps what Andy was referring to at the start of tonight's discussion. Obviously, not using a dedicated summative assessment resource at the moment, but although it might not necessarily be the purpose of assessment to back up teacher judgments, it certainly helps.
It predicts for you as well, based on what they're doing. It will show you where they're likely to be, and it tells you who needs to be on intervention and on watch.
Yeah.
There's just bucket loads of really useful features, and it has had an impact.
Yeah.
Our results were good in July.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to bring a poll on screen, number 3, which is just asking you what you feel would be the most important features of an assessment product. Obviously, it might be all of those things that are important to you. So try, if you can possibly limit it to sort of the must-haves rather than the nice-to-haves. And Andy, for you, maybe a particularly interesting poll thinking, if you were to buy that summative assessment product, what really are the must-have features of it? And we try to think of everything we could, but if there are any features of products maybe that you're currently using or that you would like to have that we haven't thought of there, just let us know in the chat pod any kind of extra things that we may have missed off. It would be really good to get that feedback on what's really important when it comes to assessment products. I'll give you a moment there, and I'm just going to have a sip of water whilst you submit your votes. Okay, let's have a look at what you said.
What do you mean by an assessment product?
It's a really good question. Who said that? Is that Jamie?
Yeah.
I guess what I meant by that was a commercially provided assessment tool that you buy, basically, and you're spending money on it. But
was it something that was electronically based or not electronically based?
Doesn't necessarily have to be electronically based. I mean, that would be good to get your feedback. Maybe you could let us know in the chat pod. It may be that you want paper-based tests or testing materials that you can print off. Or if you want something electronic with all the kind of bells and whistles and maybe, I don't know, an integrated tracking tool or something, I'm thinking off the top of my head, there's really no boundaries to it. So it'd be interesting to get your feedback, though, on what you would like if you could sort of have the perfect thing.
Well, because we've talked about assessment tracking resources.
Yeah.
So, target tracker from my point of view.
Yeah.
But then you've also talked about resources which are used for helping to make effectively summative or formative assessments.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, okay, so I've got a target tracker at my school.
Yeah.
Well, we also use TestSpace as a tool for teachers to help make their summative formative assessments.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Products, but actually they do completely different jobs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a really, really good point to raise, is that there are a few differences. And some products out there do it all. They do the kind of tracking, but they also do the kind of data gathering, if you like, as well, the actual measuring of attainment, really, and how children are doing those testing materials. So let me have a look at the poll. I mean, I guess for the purposes of the poll, you could think of either. It might be a all-encompassing product that does both, the information gathering and the testing, but also allows you to track progress and log in and maybe see the progress that children have made. I'm not sure, but interesting point that you raise. Let me just have a look in the chat pod, and actually let me share the results of that poll with you. There we go. Well, it certainly looks from your feedback. A gap analysis tool is was mentioned by most of you. 6 of you have said that that would be a real key feature. Let me have a look at the votes and who's voted what. Perhaps if I could come to you, Andy. Sorry, I'm just picking on you now. So you've said, obviously, gap analysis tool, you're in agreement with sort of most of the group there that would be important, but you've also selected a few other things used across the school, every year group, flexibility,
yep.
and also, interestingly, you selected their standardised scores to do those kind of national comparisons. Talk us through why those features are particularly important to you then.
Okay. In an ideal world, I'd go back to the old system. I quite like the old system. Sub-levels. Everybody knew where they were.
Yeah.
And really, I think what we want to get back to is something where we all know that we're all on the same playing field. We all know what the national standard looks like. And any product that comes out has got to be one that helps us along the way with that.
Yeah, yeah. So in that sense, you know, obviously before it was quite nice because everybody was doing a similar kind of thing or the same kind of thing, and it was much easier to compare. So if you were using at least a product where, okay, not everybody in the country is using it, but a lot of people are, and you are able to compare against those other schools that are also using that product, then would that be quite appealing to you to get that? Those standardised scores really, and that national comparison, which you actually know is genuinely comparable.
Yeah, I think at the moment all we're doing is shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
All right, we've had one year where we've seen what the assessments look like.
Yeah.
But Justin Greening has announced that there are going to be major changes again. So do we actually know what primary assessment is going to look like in May 2017? And I think the answer is no.
Mm.
So I don't know how an assessment product or system is going to help us with that right now.
Yeah.
We need to stop having the policy changes, certainly policy changes mid-year, and allow us some clarity, allow us to know what the goalposts are to work towards them. And then that's where I think the industry can come in and really support.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna pick you up on that point there, Andy, because I don't know if you were already logged in at the start when I was saying. So Justine Greening, Secretary of Education, has done a speech or a statement today, and we've picked out a few bits from that statement, and I'm going to drag a couple of quotes on the screen. They're at the top there. If I hide the other bits, there we go. So in the top left. So she has said that first paragraph there, that they are moving towards a more settled system, or they would like a more settled system. They recognise the change in recent years, and they're setting out a timeline that there will be no new changes, no introduction of new tests or assessments before the 2018-19 academic year. So that's what's been set out today. That's hot off the press. So with that in mind, I'm going to come back to you, Andy. Does that change things for you in terms of and I know this is kind of really putting you on the spot now, how you feel in terms of how unsettled things feel at the moment, but also perhaps how likely your school would be to invest in new tools and products, knowing that, okay, things are maybe going to stay as they are for the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that statement does anything to reassure senior leaders in schools, because actually what it says is, okay, we're in 3 years of transition rather than 1.
Yeah.
That actually we don't quite know what we're doing yet. It almost feels like we know we've cocked it up a bit. Give us a bit of time. Let's think about it, and then we'll try and get it right. Yeah,
yeah. So don't want to put words in your mouth, do you interpret that as no changes right now this second, but come 2018-19, you'll be kind of waiting for something to happen? so it kind of just feels like it's not imminent, but it will still happen. Yeah.
To me, it sounds like we're just going to get sorted, and then they're going to mess it up again.
Absolutely. We're going to have to, if we invest now in a load of resources, if they're going to change it in time, we're going to have to invest again. You know, we've got no money as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a reminder really that, you know, yes, it might be stable for now, but there's sort of that looming sense of, you know, what's going to be in 2 to 3 years' time. Okay, interesting. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Andy. I thought it was very timely what you were saying, and I thought, I'll bring that on just because it felt like the right time. Okay, I just want to come back to the idea of standardised schools and several others. Sorry to interrupt.
Can I just say something about you coming to standardisation? You're you know, reading this quote again, they're talking about consistency and reliability of approach.
Yeah.
Well, an HMI that I was talking to recently, and an HMI that was prepared to talk at a conference, was talking about the need throughout the whole profession for inspections as well, to be able to walk into a school and know how to judge progress and attainment and what it looks like across all year groups, not just year 6.
Yes.
So if HMI are coming out and saying this, then that's where this profession is. That's where policy has got to head.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Really. Really valid point. Very. Very interesting. Has anybody got anything to follow up on that before I move on? So I do just want to ask about standardisation, and I know it is a really key thing at the moment, and kind of finding a system and a way for schools to really know where they are and how that compares, and not only for schools but for HMI, for everybody really. Several of you others did say that would be an important aspect of an assessment product. Let me come to somebody else who did. Sarah. So if I could come to you, Sarah, I know you selected that as an important feature. Perhaps you could just talk us through your thinking there.
Sorry, was that me you just spoke to? Did you? I literally just got back. I did put on the chat.
Sarah.
Just pop out.
Oh, sorry to put you on the spot. I was just saying we were just looking at the poll results there, and also saying, you know, about how difficult it is really for schools to be able to compare in this very complex and varied assessment system that we have now. And I noticed in the poll that you selected standardised scores to compare against other children in the UK. That would be an important feature of an assessment product. So I was just wondering if you could talk us through your reasoning really for selecting that option.
Well, that's certainly something that our deputy head seems quite keen on, and I think we're kind of hovering just slightly above average in terms of, you know, national performance, but I think, you know, our deputy head is quite keen to, you know, to bring us up a bit higher than that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And if anybody is currently using any tools that do offer either standardised scores or any of those other features, and a product which you think really delivers. We've heard Accelerated Reader, and Naomi sort of really praised all the tools and features incorporated within that resource.
I think I should have shares with them, actually.
Well, yeah, it was a very glowing reference. You know, obviously not only for assessment, but also you said about pupil engagement, motivation. Yeah. It's so much bigger than assessment. If anybody else uses any resources which really you would recommend basically to a colleague, let us know in the chat pod. I'm going to give you a moment actually to just let us know if there are any kind of anything that you use which you think really delivers on those important features. I'll give you a moment to just type away. Jamie, I noticed you said you use TestBase. Forgive me, I'm not very au fait with TestBase, but do you just use that in Year 6, or is it across all of Key Stage 2, or how do you use that?
It does tend to be primarily used by Years 5 and 6 and also Year 2. So TestBase use that as they compile it into a huge database. So if I'd been doing some work on fractions with my pupils, that what I could do is I could go to all the old SAT paper questions that there used to be on fractions, and I could select those to use as an assessment. Now what TestBase also did was, towards the end of the last academic year, they published tests for pupils in years 3, 4 and 5, which were not dissimilar to the QCA tests that used to be available. And those were published, and we used those at the last academic year, and as a consequence, after the Year 6 scores had been published, they then assigned a standardised score for those tests and a definition of what MET would be at years 3, 4 and 5.
Yeah, okay. And Jamie, I also noticed from your pre-session feedback that you also use CGP resources. So how do you use those alongside the test base and also the target tracker as well?
They tend to be used more as curricular resources rather than as something that would be used as in an assessment method. But obviously the teachers are using them in a formative approach. So when their children all have a copy of the workbooks and the textbooks. That's not quite the right word I'm looking for. What's the word I'm looking for? Help me.
Is it
pupil learning books?
Yeah.
Workbooks. And all our pupils have copies of both of those.
Right. Okay. Great, thank you. And interestingly, Naomi is saying she also uses those books, but they're purchased sort of as an extra by parents, really.
It's cheaper for a school to purchase them than a parent. So we just offer them. We give them a list, and we sell hundreds of them. Well, we don't make a profit. We just sell them for what it costs us.
Interesting. Okay. Lovely. Thank you. If anybody's got anything further to add, either on that poll on screen or anything that we said about standardisation, or I know we talked a bit earlier in the discussion about the importance of gap analysis as well to inform teaching and planning. So I won't go into that in too much depth, but if anybody has anything more to add, then do let me know. And I will also just say apologies if I'm asking people things over the phone that you may have typed in the chat pod. It's very difficult. It's a very active chat pod tonight, so it's difficult to keep on top of it all. But you're certainly a fab group. So thank you. Let me just have a look at my discussion notes and see if there's any more questions that I want to ask before I move on. No? Okay. Let me quickly, for about next 5-10 minutes, talk about training then and support, and then finally we'll come on to that sort of difficult topic of budgets, really, and how much money you have to spend on all these difficult changes, if any money at all. Which may well be the case. I think I did notice somebody had written in the chat pod that there wasn't a huge amount to be cutting back on, let alone spending. But coming to training and support, I wonder if in the chat pod you could just briefly describe the type of training and support that will be required by you and also the teachers in your school in order to implement the new assessment system, so the changes to SATs specifically, in order to implement those changes effectively, and of course more broadly the changes to the assessment system. What training and support will be required? Fran's just put the question there, Fran and Joe have just put the question in there in the chat pod, so just let us know. I'll give you a moment, but if you do want to say over the phone, then that's fine too. Teresa, you're saying more moderation than ever. Are you currently getting any support with that moderation, or is it just within your local cluster?
Yeah, we're in an alliance of 5 schools, so we were doing a lot of moderation across the cluster, but we've still got quite a dynamic authority. I mean, we've not got much support at authority level. Because lots of schools have stayed with the authority rather than going to academies around near us. We're not an academy, so we're accessing support through them, and they've had a lot of moderation meetings as well. To be perfectly honest, they haven't had to have moderation meetings before they staff go out as well. So, yeah, that's been a major. We've done much more external moderation than ever before. So, yeah, that's year 2 and year 6. It's really difficult and against the interim frameworks, it's really difficult with other year groups because everybody's got their own different system, even within the Alliance of Schools.
And I've heard that there was a bit of disparity in the SATS results from schools that did have writing moderation versus those that didn't. So do you think that will also lead to, a greater demand really for more support with, writing assessment, but also the moderation of that as well?
It's happened already in our authority because even we're usually like in the top 25% nationally for results in our authority, and we were below national picture, which shouldn't happen given the cohorts of children we have in our authority. So they've already put a special project to try and raise results on, which is overhauling, including overhauling their own assessment system.
Okay, lovely. And Claire there saying, you are an LEA writing moderator. So Claire, perhaps you can talk us through any training that you have had or may require if you are moderating again this year. What will you need? What type of support will you and schools need?
I've been asked again to do it again this year, although they've not said when the window of moderation is going to be yet. So I've said provisionally I'll do it, but if it's before SATS, if the year 16, I don't want to go out of class. What training we get a day, and really we get given the work that the exemplars that are out there, and told good luck. Yeah.
So not much.
No. I mean that might just be my local authority, but the support that we did get though was. If we felt uncertain, then somebody else from the local authority would come out with you to the first moderation session and work with you. But it wasn't great fun.
Interesting. Okay. And just moving away slightly from talking specifically about moderation, but also CPD and training, when it comes to specific resources and products that your school may be using, what type of training do you have or would you like to kind of accompany those products and resources? So Claire, if I could come straight back to you, because I know you've got that Read Write Ink. Did you have any training when you adopted that, or would you want any ongoing?
No, our head teacher bought the manual and read it and then sort of condensed it to us and handed us the manual too, saying that there just wasn't the money in the budget, unfortunately. So we've all got a reading guidance. We had a part of an inset day on how to deliver it, and the fact that we were all going to deliver at the same time in the same manner. But that was all that the budget allowed for.
Interesting. Anybody else got anything that they would like to contribute about maybe any successful training or CPD that they have had in order to implement their assessment system in their school effectively? It'd be nice to hear a really positive story. Has anybody got one about training and CPD? No, the silence there is deafening. Okay, really, really interesting. And just a sort of broad question out to the group. I can see there, Hilary there saying it's expensive. Claire said it was expensive. Is it lack of funding then that is holding your schools back from receiving any training for assessment and assessment tools, or is it that it's not a priority? Perhaps somebody would like to sort of shed some light on that.
No, it's Hilary speaking. I think it's a priority.
Yeah.
Just that it is extremely expensive, and also, I mean, Read Write Ink is different because I had to get the staff trained and TAs trained because there's just so many people that have to do it in the morning. So it was a case of me having to buy. It's extremely expensive. And we now do development days and have sort of follow-ups and things to keep everybody on their toes, really, and so that it's working. And they're also very expensive. I think over a year that comes to something like £3,000, and that's a lot out of our budget.
Yeah.
But if we want it to work, we've got no choice, really. And I think it's the same with lots of things that we're offered. We need them, but actually, some things you send staff and think, this is going to be really good. And they come back and they say, oh, it was really boring, it was an awful day. And, it's just cost you £375, because that's roughly the price of somebody going out to a course now. Plus then you need the supply for their class, plus then you need to pay for their travel. So if it's a waste of money, that you could have spent that on resources in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I've just put the poll on screen there about how important it is. If you were to adopt a new assessment product in your school, the importance of some kind of accompanying training in that decision to go with that product. So I'll await all of your responses. Interestingly, Andy, there you said it's essential. So it really would be something that you would look to train you would want staff training to go with any purchase that you made, Andy.
If you're going to buy something, you need to do it properly. Like our colleague on the phone was saying about the recycling stuff. You can't use that without having had the proper training.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
Interesting. Other people. So Sarah's also said it's essential. Sarah, have you had anything in the past which has been particularly useful or successful training for an assessment product?
I'm not sure if we have, and perhaps that's why I think it's so essential, because otherwise, you have a coordinator or somebody trying to introduce it to staff sometimes, and sometimes often they're not actually that confident or clued up about it. So them trying to cascade it down to all the other staff just always work as well as it could. So, I think it is quite important, really, that, that the maker comes in and explains all the features as well. Otherwise, you can actually be missing out on a lot of the features that the product's capable of doing, purely because, you can't get to grips with it.
Well, yes, absolutely, and I can speak from personal experience as well, that sometimes you have all this stuff available to you, but if you don't know how to use it, then it's sort of wasted money, which seems really sad when there's not much money to spend.
That's right.
There we go. Okay, that's really, really interesting feedback. Thank you all for that. Let me have a look at my list of questions. And I think actually, since many of you have talked about budget or lack of, I'm going to bring a few polls on screen to just ask you about that, really, and get a sense, or just so that our clients and publishers that we work with also get a sense from you of really what money you have available to spend. So let me just see if I've got a poll ready. Here we go. So this is a text poll. So rather than typing it in the chat pod, we understand that it may, you may not want to divulge this information with everybody. So on the bottom left there, you'll see my question, and then if you just type your answer in the bar and submit it, then it just means that not everybody else sees it if you don't want them to.
Are you asking as a proportion of the whole budget or the proportion of the curricular budget?
Or a figure.
I was thinking of a figure, actually. If you know a figure, a very ballpark figure, then that would be great. But if not, then a proportion of the curriculum budget is fine.
Well, I can tell you how much I spend on assessment.
Yeah. If you're able to let us know, well, if anything, if you're able to let us know how much you spend, that would be good. I also appreciate that in different schools, it can work quite differently. I know we've heard from some schools that have a dedicated assessment budget, and then other schools where it would come out of either the curriculum budget or a maths or literacy budget. So if you do want to let us know in your answer there, if it is a dedicated assessment budget, or let us know in the chat pod, or if it comes out of the curriculum budget, let us know. Okay, and I'll give you a moment to just do that. And thank you to those of you who have submitted your answers. That's fantastic. Thank you, Hilary, for clarifying that in the chat pod as well. That's great. So you have a dedicated amount set aside for assessment. That's
Yeah, because I have an assessment lead. She bids for money every year, and so that money's given to her to manage.
Yeah, interesting. If anybody else has a dedicated assessment coordinator, that would be good to know, or actually as maybe deputy head or head teacher, you oversee that, or possibly to our literacy and numeracy coordinators in the group, you know, if actually your role is to seek out assessment products for maths and literacy. So just let us know kind of the structure really in your school. That would be good to know. I'll let you put that either in the poll or in the chat pod there. Great. Okay, thank you. Right, so that almost brings our session to a close. I'll leave that poll on screen just for those of you who may be filling out some final answers. I've just got one final poll to ask you, which is this one. I'll put it at the top left. How likely is it really that your school will invest in something to support the new assessment framework? Let's say invest in the next 12 to 18 months. So I'll try and be quite specific on time. And if you have said very or fairly likely, then it would be great if you could follow that up in the chat pod there with what you're looking for specifically. I know you've been telling us during this evening's session, and that poll you completed earlier with the kind of features, the top features, was really, really interesting. But if there is something really specific that you're going to be looking for, just let us know. Okay. Lovely. Okay, and I'll broadcast those results so that you can see that. Great. Well, I think that pretty much brings the discussion to a close. It's very strange having a 90-minute session because usually they are the full 2 hours. But we've crammed absolutely loads in, and you've been a great group tonight. So thank you all for your feedback. And I know that it will be really interesting to many of our clients who have an interest in primary assessment and are ultimately trying to make your lives a lot easier, which is difficult when I know you've not got a huge amount of money to spend. But yes, any closing comments or thoughts you have, let us know in the chat there. Thank you again for your participation tonight from both me and Fran and Joe. It's been a really, really enjoyable session, and I hope you all have lovely evenings and nice half terms as well.
Thank you.
All right, take care everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.